How is a focal length of a lens determined? And why is a 25mm on micro four thirds not a 50mm lens on full frame? The focal length is the distance between the plane of the sensor and the optical center or nodal point of the lens. And this is what determines the field of view of the lens. The focal length of your lens isn't measured from the front of the lens to the focus plane or the film plane, nor is it measured from the bottom of the lens to the film plane. This is because, or you can tell this because lens sizes can be quite different. This 25mm f1.8 is tiny in comparison to the 25mm f1.2, which is much bigger, twice the size perhaps, and twice the width. So the front of that lens to the focal plane, or the back of that lens to the focal plane, will be completely different to this little 25mm. So that's what it definitely isn't measured by. On a very simple lens with just one element, the focal length is measured from the center of that element to your focal plane or your film. It's really that simple. The light comes in, it hits that lens, that's where your focal length is measured, and then to the back of your camera, your sensor. Where it gets more complex is where you have lots of elements in your lens, and you need lots of elements in the lens to reduce things like barrel distortion, fringing, and to make your lens sharper. So the light travels through all those lenses, and on the lens at the point where the light converges and then splits, that's where your nodal point is. That's the part where you measure your focal length. From that point, that nodal point where the light converges to your sensor or your film in old film days, that's where you measure your focal length. Now, that focal length can change even if you haven't got a telephoto lens, because when you focus your camera, that your lens moves slightly to focus, to slightly shift the lenses to bring your image into focus. And that shift of lenses might only be minute, but it does move your focal length slightly. And obviously, even though you've got a fixed prime lens, your focal length will still change as you focus it in or out, and that nodal point will move back or forwards. Another thing to be aware of, when the light converges into that point and then splits back out to hit your sensor, at that point, that's when your image is turned upside down or inverted, and it hits your sensor upside down. And that's why when you often see an image that's upside down, what your sensor sees is an upside down image. What you see is the right way up. It's only upside down because the light converges on that nodal point and then splits and hits your sensor. And that hopefully explains why a 50mm lens in full frame isn't a 25mm lens in micro four thirds, because the distance between the nodal point and the film, the plane, the sensor, is 25mm on a micro four thirds. However, the distance between the focal sensor, the sensor, and your nodal point on a 50mm lens on full frame, say, is 50mm, 5 centimeters from the sensor, and that's obviously much different between the two lenses. Now, where they are compatible, and so I've said in a previous video, micro four thirds 25mm and a full frame 50mm is the angle of view, the 46 or 47mm, whatever that is, that angle of view of a 50mm lens in full frame or a 25mm lens in micro four thirds. That's the only thing that's the same, is that angle of view. All the other parts of those lenses are going to give you a different output. Obviously, on a telephoto lens, where you're zooming in and out the focal length, the elements move so far, much more than they would do if you're focusing, and that's where the nodal point moves backwards and forwards towards your focal plane, and that's why your focal distance moves equivalent to where you're positioning your lens, and that nodal point is the thing that moves back and forward. It's that simple. I hope you found this short video interesting. I found it a little bit interesting when I found this out, and I thought, because I thought it was useful to know, I would share it with you. If you have found it interesting, why not give it a like? That would be amazing. And if you're enjoying my content, my photography content, then why don't you subscribe to the channel? Because that would be equally great as well. Thank you very much again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.